One, two, one, two, one, two. 1, 2. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the presentation of active logging for fast turnaround video on demand. I'm Mark Gilbert from Sienna, and for those of you who don't know who we are, I'll just play a very quick video, primarily to get more people in. So if you get bored, though, just ignore it, but it's a little bit hard-hitting.
A new head of state, the fastest man on Earth, the discovery of a new planet. When the world's leading broadcasters have something to air, there is no better choice. Sienna, the #1 solution. Next generation workflow. Next generation workflow. Next generation workflow for news, sport, live events, television production. Sienna, chosen by the world's leading broadcasters. Sienna, the system with the tightest, most seamless integration. EMPS, Optimus, Open, Edit with Final Cut, Premiere, Media Composer. Sienna, the complete system. Baseband and tapeless ingest, media asset management, superb edit integration, workflow process automation, mouse-driven playout, fully integrated archive, and much more. Sienna, setting the standard that others aim. Superior performance, seamless work, multi-platform delivery, geo-search and geotech, unlimited scalability, one-click multi-site share, flexible and affordable. Build your entire workflow around Sienna, or just upgrade your existing infrastructure with the Sienna integration appliance. Sienna, powerful, scalable, flexible, affordable. No compromise.
Okay, folks, sorry to bore you with that, but I thought we'd get everybody started. Essentially, that's what Sienna is. We do a whole load of different media stuff end to end. But today I'm going to talk to you about a very specific area of some new technology we're developing. It's kind of specialist in some ways because it's related to a whole new market that's opening up with convergent TV and stuff like that. But I hope that I'll be able to bring out some additional rounding out topics that everybody will be interested in. So, questions, who are we? Gallery. Well, Gallery makes Sienna. I won't give you all the spiel. Basically, we've got tons of really, really good stuff for broadcast. Got lots of high-end customers all over the world, and we've got some interesting technology. Our customer base is global. It's mainly big, medium, and large players all over the world. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. We're going to start by thinking about the changing face of video consumption. The broadcast industry is changing dramatically at the moment, and what we're seeing is a transformation of what people consider broadcast to be. 10 years ago it was just baseband delivery. Now we're into all kinds of stuff with convergence TV, video on demand, second screen, internet, the whole works. We're going to look at the objectives of what we're trying to do with video on demand, because the presentation today is primarily about active logging, which is a new technology we've created to give you video on demand faster. We're also going to talk generally about metadata and multi-platform delivery. We'll talk about some target applications for the technology, and then there was some time for questions if anybody has any. So, first of all, our objectives. Essentially, because TV content's no longer delivered on a schedule, there's a lot of video on demand, all the other different ways of getting content. It's a different demand on the broadcaster. And we're seeing that predictions by 2015 will have up to half a billion connected TV sets to the internet. So the whole idea of where your television comes from is changing as well. Video on demand is also becoming personal, so broadcasters are seeking to create a more personal experience than just giving everybody the same thing. And as we become connected, broadcasters start knowing more about the people who are watching and are able to give targeted experiences to those people. And also, we're seeing second screen behavior becoming very important. If we look at people who own things like tablets and smartphones, we're seeing that maybe 60 to 70% of those people regularly sit in front of the television set with a smartphone or a tablet in their hand. And often they're doing ancillary browsing related to that content. They might be looking up some detail about something on screen. So this whole concept of a second screen is really becoming very, very important. And actually, it's, of all the things we're seeing happening, second screen is the thing that's happening most rapidly, because there's such an incumbent set of users with these tablets, and without being told to, they're all sat there with them on their laps. So it's a really important thing that's happening. However, customers have also got quite a lot of demand. So, for example, I'll give you a good example. So let's say we're on the weekend, we've got a live TV show. That TV show has been broadcast live. Obviously, it's got commercials in, all those kind of things. When that TV show ends, your average consumer expects to be able to go to video on demand and watch it again, or watch bits of it again, or maybe they came in halfway through and they want to watch it from the start. They expect it to be available as soon as that show ends, and they don't understand if it's not. Now, the fact is, at the moment, is a lot of live television content. There's quite a long delay after the show ends before it's available on video on demand. It might be an hour, it might be 2 hours. But the point is that consumers are going to get that content and they're not finding it. And what happens is they end up going to YouTube or some other unauthorized source of material to watch bits and pieces somebody's done. So why aren't the broadcasters actually delivering that content instantly as soon as the show ends? One of the problems is that it's not really that easy. If you're just recording something and playing it back, that's fine, you could do that. But typically, the video on demand content that we're going to be replaying is actually a derivative of the live content. And most typically, the things that are going to be changed are they want to remove the advertising from the original live footage. And the reason is because you're going to put new adverts in. You're going to resell those adverts through the video on demand platform. So one of the things that we need to have is a finished video with the adverts removed. That's what's task number one. Also, I may be overtaking my slides here actually. We'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, we also want to do things like where they've got TV, like on this screen on the right here, you can see that there's a telephone number, a vote-in telephone number. Obviously, we've got regulatory issues in the UK. We've got situations where maybe the competition is closed when the show closed. So what we need to do is we need to eliminate those kind of graphics that may lead the consumer to call in on that line and incur a charge, or maybe just be frustrated that the competition's closed. So we need to remove the commercials. We need to cover up the telephone numbers. Also, there might be some profanity or something that you want to cover up. Somebody's, said something rude or flicked a finger or something. We might want to cover that up as well before we put it onto the video on demand platform. So clearly, what we're not doing is just recording the feed, and when the show ends, start playing that feed on video on demand. We actually need to be editing that feed in an interactive way and producing a hybridized content. And that's what causes the problem, because typically, that editing process might be done during the show, but if it's finished at the end of the show, they've then got to export it from the editor, they've then got to start the encoding process, and for a long show, a 2-hour show maybe, you might be into, approaching an hour for the encode into 8 different formats, things like that. So you can see why live content is not appearing on video on demand immediately. And that's what we've aimed to solve with active logging. Okay? We're aiming to get our video on demand version ready within one advertising break of the end of the show. And we're going to do it into lots of different formats. While we're along the way, what we're also going to do is gather rich metadata, because as I mentioned to you earlier, the rapidly expanding part of this market is the second screen experience, and that's absolutely begging for content. So the question being is, what can we do as we're basically editing this live show to actually also gather bits of metadata, embed tags and things like that, so that the video on demand version of this show is now going to be enriched with metadata to drive second screens. This is where all the future is going. So it was impossible. It's not anymore. So active logging is actually not that complicated, but it's done very cleverly. And what we're going to talk about is, rather than the traditional pattern, which would be ingest, the old-fashioned pattern was ingest, finish ingesting, start editing, play it out, and then play it out again. Obviously, over time, we've been able to do things like edit during capture. So now you can ingest and you can edit at the same time, but you can't generally encode at the same time. And what we've done with active logging is we've created a clever way to make all of those things happen in parallel. So the main difference we're doing is the ingest part is just bog standard. We're doing an ingest with a system that allows us to play back that ingesting material whilst you're capturing it. Is that me? Sorry. But what we're going to do is, rather than editing the content, we're going to perform active logging on the content. And the difference with this is we're not going to be sat in an edit system. We're actually going to have a jog shuttle and a screen. And very much like you might use a slow motion control system, something like that, we're going to basically play the show in catch-up. So we're just behind the show, we've got our jog shuttle, and we're basically watching for something that we need to do. We're looking for our jobs. A lot of the time, you're going to be sat there with your feet up, watching the show. Suddenly, what will happen is a graphic will come up. Call this number to vote. Okay, what you've got to do at that point is you can then jog back, you can mark in and say, at this point, we need a CG to come on. Go to the end, CG to come off. And what you're doing with your active logging is you're creating an event list in real time. But the reason it's active is that event list is not just going to sit in some file somewhere for somebody to look at later. That event list is actually actively connected to our playout channel. So in parallel with the active logging channel, where you're jog shuttling through your recording as it's happening, you've also got a dynamic playback channel. And this channel is actually going to play back the same content as it's being ingested, slightly behind that, but it's going to be respecting the logging information you're giving it. So if you tell it to cover up this telephone number, when the dynamic playback gets to that point in the video, it's actually going to put a CG on, okay? And the output of the dynamic playback is going to a live real-time encoding system. So everybody knows that you can stick a feed into an encoder and you can get a file out. These real-time encoding systems exist. What we're doing is we're allowing the encoding to take place just slightly after the show starts. Now, fortunately, in commercial television, one of the things we're going to do is remove the commercials. And we might have, say, 20 to 27% of the show is going to be commercials, which means that the finished encoded piece is actually going to be 27% less than the original one, which gives us a bit of a delay. So we can actually start the playback 25% after the beginning of the show. Gives us time to start our logging. The dynamic playback will start 25% into the show. As it goes through, it's actually skipping commercials. So the other thing we're logging in the active logging is the ins and the outs of the commercials. When the dynamic playback gets to the commercial, it jumps over it and takes it out completely. And over the course of the show, the playback is actually going to catch up with real time. And at the end of the show, almost everything is going to come together. The ingest is going to finish, the logging's finished, the playback's going to finish, the encoding's going to finish, and all of your material is ready. And we'll have created an XML manifest as well. If we compare it with the old model, I probably should have shown this earlier, but basically if we look at the old model, there's the old at the top and the new at the bottom. The old model is based on our ingest. Both systems are based on the ingest. So this is a real-time recording of our live event. What we're going to do in the old model is we're going to use an editor to essentially edit that. We're going to insert CGs, we're going to remove the adverts, okay? Done with a timeline in Final Cut or whatever else you might be using. Although it's what you're used to, it's actually quite fiddly. And what we found is doing it with a jog shuttle is actually much quicker. When you've finished editing, what we need to do is export. And that can be quite a slow process or whatever. It's a process that takes time. It's another thing. And by the way, the show's already finished. So we've already missed our deadline. We've only just started to export. Then we go into encoding. Okay, into multiple different versions. Again, with a long 2-hour show, it's going to take quite a long time to finish all those exports, even on a fast system. And then finally, all of the video demand systems need an XML manifest. That's going to be the details of where you took the commercials out, plus any other metadata that's relevant. And generally, that might well be made manually if you've gone the kind of traditional linear editing, non-linear editing route. So that's how we used to do it, and we can see that it's taken us, maybe an hour or something after the show to actually get our finished video on demand and manifest ready. So let's look at how the Sienna active logging model works. What we do is, it looks quite similar actually, but what we're doing is, instead of editing in a non-linear editor underneath, we're using the active logging. This is us with our jog shuttle, just playing right behind real time. And this here is the dynamic playback. So we're logging here, and we're marking our CG, we're marking our advert, and as we do that, we're communicating that event list to the dynamic playback channel. And the dynamic playback channel starts 25% after the ingest, and it basically plays through, and everything we told it to do, it's going to do. And even though we haven't told it to do that yet, we will have told it to do that by the time we get here. So we're working just in time. Oh, you've actually got quite a bit of headroom, but you're working just in time. It gets a bit more hairy as you go towards the end, gets closer to real time. But we're basically calling dynamic playback and active logging connected together with the synchronization of an event list. And of course, because we're playing back here, we can start our encoder here, and we can be encoding in real time. So the encoder is only just behind the actual playback, which means at the end of the show, the logging's finished, and the encoding's finished. And what the system also does is, as we're going along, we also create the XML manifest automatically as well. And together, this gives us the active logging advantage. Now, if you look at this green section right here, this is literally the advertising window that you've unlocked. If you think about normally, this is full of advertising. then there's this whole delay where there's no advertising on video on demand. Then suddenly you can start advertising again. And bearing in mind we're removing the commercials to replace them in the video on demand, you can see this is a dead air. Broadcasters are making no money in that region there, and it's right after their most important show. So you can see why this is such an important region. And what Sienna Active Logging lets you do is actually get your video on demand here with your new commercials, and this is the active logging advantage. So hopefully that explains the whole point of this somewhat technical system. It's got a true commercial reality. So let's look at how we do it. It's done with a lot of commodity hardware and some special software. So we're using one new ingest and playout ports using Thunderbolt Video. They've proven to be very, very reliable. They're quite low cost and they're compact. So that gives us our ingest and our playout channels. We're going to be doing our active logging on something like an iMac with a jog shuttle. And we've also got a nice little thing here for logging, which is we're using an iPad as a kind of a palette. I don't know if you can see that, but basically this is a touch screen with a whole grid of different things. And this can be customized for each individual event. So we've got pictures of all of our contestants, and we've got all the different things they might do, and we've got little buttons for product placement, so that we can actually do some nice interactive, rich logging as we're going along. And as I said, this has proven to be much, much easier than sitting in an edit suite. You're literally sat there with your feet up with a jog shuttle, catch up, wait for something to happen, wind back, mark in, mark out, catch up. And it's a trivial process. You can even eat your lunch while you're doing it. I mean, it really is much less intensive than doing it in editing, but it's faster, it's easier, and obviously it's giving us our window of opportunity. And we're adding rich metadata as well at the same time. So this is the production palette I mentioned. This really, really does work very, very well. And these palettes can be built up from Excel. You just need to have, if you've got a two-dimensional grid in Excel, you can export it straight onto the production palette, and it becomes a touchscreen logging interface for sports or any other application that you might want. So I won't touch too much on this because this is quite in-depth, but basically this is the event list that we're building up as we do our logging. And the types of things that we might do is, one of the nice things that we can do with this is we can accurately control the encoder as well. Because whilst we're doing it real time, it's not like dumping a file on an encoder where you know you're going to get the beginning to the end of that file. We've actually got a live encoder, so the point where we press record on the encoder is quite critical, because that's going to determine where the beginning of our video on demand file starts. And what we don't want to do is have the end of the last program before our show comes up. So one of the events that you actually mark with your jog shuttle is, this is the start. And this is the start drops a scripting event into the event list, and that scripting event is actually going to control the encoder. In this case, we're controlling a pipeline encoder using an HTTP message. So this system, when the dynamic playback gets to that point in the show where you want the encoding to start, it'll actually issue an instruction to the encoder saying, right, going to record. It's then going to play out. We've got a lot of locators here. These locators don't actually do anything in the active logging system. They're just metadata. But they will appear in our XML manifest, and they'll be driven into our second screen experiences and our associated web experiences as well. We've got our graphic bugs off here. So when the CGs come up on the screen and we know we've got to cover them up, we just pick from our little menu here. Is it a lower third, or is it a right, or is it a full screen cover? Click the button. It's going to insert our graphic bug on, and then later our graphic bug off. And again, similarly at the bottom, we've actually got a stop command to stop the encoder. So the entire process is driven by the dynamic playback. Starting the encoder, covering up the graphics, jumping over the adverts, stopping the encoder. And all you've literally done is logged it with this rather casual feet up jog wheel. So this is our finished product. We've got our commercials removed, phone numbers are covered up, we've got rich metadata logging. We've done accurate control of the real-time encoder so that we've actually got a good start-stop in and out, and we've created our manifest automatically, and also our system integrates very nicely with our MAM as well. And that's been another surprising benefit of this system, is that all this work that you're doing, even though it's not much work, you're adding such value to the broadcast chain, because we can be marking highlights as well. So as we're going along, if there's something interesting that might want to be stuffed up on the web as a separate subclip, mark in. There's another button you can press on your jog shuttle. It'll actually spawn it off as a subclip. That can disappear off and appear in the web somewhere. Also, whilst our delivery of this is real time, we also have another angle to it, which is that event list that we created. We can actually export that event list as a Final Cut Pro sequence. So you can actually take all the work you've done, that's designed for a dynamic playout system, and actually you've then also got it in a non-linear environment as well if you want to do another re-edit or something else later on. So let's talk a bit more about metadata. So I keep going on about logging because it's such an important part of the future of television. We've talked about second screens and other things. Really, everything is changing now. It's not just some blind audience sat watching a screen. They're interacting with it. They want more value. They want second screen associated information. They want to be able to find your content based on its metadata in a search engine. So a vanilla media file without any encrypted metadata is a poor cousin these days. Functional metadata, like commercial insertion points, obviously they're the things that the video on demand systems need, because when it gets to the commercial break in your advert that you've chopped out, that's the point where the video on demand puts in the new commercial break that's been sold to a completely different set of customers. And also the real-time metadata really is important to all this second screen stuff. I'll give you another example. So some of the things we're trying to do with second screen is additional content that has value to the viewer. We're not trying to use it just to abuse the viewer with more advertising, but by being personalized, we're trying to give people more of what they want. So, you know, a classic example would be, maybe we've got, I don't know, Germany's next top model or something. Somebody comes on the screen in a lovely dress. The people are watching it, oh, that's a nice dress. On their second screen, what do you know? Pops up, buy this dress, okay? And the reason is because the chap who's doing the video on demand of this has actually logged that point, and he's created an event token at that point, which is linked to the commercial for that same dress in the second screen system. So we're starting to inject metadata value into the material that we're preparing, which is going to be exploited by our second screen delivery systems and various other things. Same thing goes with almost anything you can think of, whether it's a action replay of all the crashes in a race meet, something like that, or the goals in football. This idea of rich logging that's active, that's actually directly linked into an actively working system that's doing all this stuff automatically, that's really what's giving us our added value. So what can we use active logging for? Obviously live TV shows is where it's most valuable, because we are unlocking that extra window of 1 hour of advertising afterwards, which is really, really valuable. But as I say, it is easier than doing it in an editor, so you might even consider it for your entire station output if you're doing it on video on demand. There's no reason not to use this system. It is easier than using the edit suite. It's faster and easier. You can do subclip creation as well, so the same people that are doing it can be creating all your web subclips for your content from the same system. And also, as you're working, the whole thing's available in our MAM as well. All of the events that you're doing will appear inside our Media Asset Manager as logged events in your source material. And you can also have a lot of people working together. Somebody else may be logging compliance on the same asset whilst you're logging the content. Somebody else spawning subclips and kicking out exciting things for the web. So let's summarize. Video on demand is an important part of the TV future. We've seen that already. The percentage of content that broadcasters are delivering as video on demand is rapidly increasing, and you can't ignore it. It's also an important value add for broadcasters because of this targeted advertising that we can do, the opportunity to personalize it, and obviously it's just a revenue stream as well. We know that consumers expect to be available immediately. We can do that now. Rich metadata drives second screen opportunities, and really the second screen market is like a box of fireworks. The broadcast industry is some kind of slow-moving snail. Meanwhile, the whole second screen and connected TV market is exploding. Every single day there's a new company here and a new company there, a new technique. And England is definitely not in the lead in this. In Europe, we've got other countries that are much further ahead than we are with second screen applications, and even with IPTV delivery, because they've chosen different methods of getting their mainstream TV to their customers. They're a lot more connected. So there's a big opportunity to exploit this market for everybody involved in broadcast, whether it's content creators, technology providers, or people like ourselves building the infrastructure. Cost-effective, future-proof, goes without saying, and it's shipping today. So if you'd like to know more about active logging or about Sienna in general, you have some brochures there of the Sienna product line, which is, as you probably saw from the video at the beginning, it is really focused on news and sports and live production. But what we found is that there's a new opportunity for our modules in this connected TV market, and so we're finding new ways to use them in this new market. There is a complete demo of active logging, the whole thing end to end, if you want to get your hands on it, at the Route 6 booth G30 over there. They're just right next to the IDX booth, which you can see is all white. You can visit sienna.tv on the web, or you can email us. Has anybody got any questions about this system? Can you start? Oh, good question. Could you start showing it? Well, okay, that comes down to your encoder. So actually, yes, you could. I mean, if your encoder could deliver something that could be used whilst it's encoding, absolutely, go ahead. I mean, obviously, currently it makes the manifest at the end of the encode, but there's no reason it couldn't be making the manifest as it goes along. So absolutely, yeah, I guess you could start using the VOD file as you go along. If maybe your encoder is doing a kind of a gradual upload to your site, yeah, sounds perfect. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes.
How do you work that out? What happens when broadcast decides to move more or less?
Okay, so it comes down to how tight your nerve is, really, because you can run this thing as tight as you like. Obviously, humans are going to need a reaction time. You want to be a few minutes behind so that you've got a chance to turn your wheel and mark your logs and everything. The way that we're looking at as a rule of thumb is that Ofcom has got a limited regulation. You can only have, 27% of the show can be adverts or something. So as a rule of thumb, if you said, okay, we're going to start playback 30% after the start of the show, then you know that even by eating up all the commercials, you're still going to have a couple of 3 minutes at the end of leeway, which is your first ad break. If you want to do it tighter than that, you absolutely can. If you want more headroom, you can set the delay in our ingest. Our ingest tool kicks off the playback, and you just set the proportion that you want to wait before it starts playing it back. So it's up to you, basically. You can set, yeah. Okay, if you've misjudged it, you've screwed up. Well, okay, so there's two things we can do. In the event list, we're jumping over commercials. So basically what happens is the dynamic playback gets to a commercial, and this is the encoder following behind. So the dynamic playback gets to the commercial, it literally leaps over it. So in the encode, we've got no commercial. There's two things you can do. If you're getting tight, but you've still got one commercial in stock, and you think, God, I'd like to keep that 5 minutes or 4 minutes it's got there. What you can do is, instead of marking in and out to skip the commercial, you can, at the beginning of the commercial, say, just pause the encoder. And at the end of the commercial, restart the encoder. And what happens is, it pauses the encoder and restarts the encoder. So the material's missing from the encode, but you've actually still eaten up that 4 minutes of real time. So you haven't got any closer to your dangerous point. Now, let's say you really even did screw up even further. I'll tell you what, the show overran. That's exactly what happens. The show overran. Oh my God! And then I'm going to put another commercial in. Suddenly our percentages have gone all out of whack. What you can also do is you get really panicky. You find a convenient point in the show and you drop a pause marker. And what it will actually do is when the dynamic playback gets to that, it'll pause itself and it'll pause the encoder, and it will sit there and it will wait for whatever you put in, a minute, 2 minutes, then it will carry on. So just find a nice kind of black frame or an edit point or something. So we've been using it with Telestream, using Pipeline and Vantage. The way that the system's been developed with the scripted control of the encoder and so on, we've made it open so it should be workable with other encoders, and we're talking to people like Elemental and things like that to see what we can do with these things. So it's open, basically. Well, okay, so basically... Yeah. Okay, so what we started off trying to make this thing self-contained because that's what our customer wanted, okay? So basically we created a minimal system like this that's designed to go standalone. It's got ingest, it's got playout, it's got control, and that's all it is. It's completely standalone. And this system actually creates the manifest as an XML file along with the end of the whole process. And to answer your question about how this fits with Sienna, so these are existing Sienna modules. There's the existing Sienna ingest, the existing Sienna playout, and all we've done is add a little bit of tinkering on the top to make this actual event listing work. What we soon discovered is, actual fact, this worked so well that we wanted to actually build it into our larger sphere. So we started to integrate it with our asset management system. The reason being is that we'd like to take the metadata from here to a new level. We'd like to have the material coming here pushed into a central system so it can start kicking off automated processes. and also so that other people can be working on the same assets in a more generic way. So we're working on this very specialist logging and playout system. At the same time, our ingested file is available throughout our MAM system to everybody's desktop, where you can be doing compliance logging, you can be spawning subclips, all that kind of thing, or you can be injecting new metadata. You can inject time-coded metadata within our MAM system. You can also do it using APIs. There's lots of different ways of doing it. The other thing which we like our MAM for is, I mentioned to you earlier that after we finish this, there may be a desire also to then bring it into the central core editing infrastructure into a nonlinear editor. So what this system does is it also drives one of the back-end servers in Sienna, which is a kind of an editing conforming server. And so all of the events that you decided that are being pushed to the dynamic playout system, it turns those into edit decision lists, if you like, that go to our back-end system, and that automatically constructs you a real file out of the material. Okay, and that real file, or it can be turned into an edit list to go into an editor, or a real file. The other thing which we're looking at for the whole second screen world is the concept of an event token. So what we want to do with this is the MAM system. We want to be able to drive lots of different second screen things. Nobody really knows what they are yet, but this whole second screen thing is electric. You want to do all kinds of stuff on it. You want to play, far off adverts. You want to be rerunning, clips of stuff that's exciting. What we want to do is we want to have a generic token that you can insert as you're logging that's going to create information in the manifest and also linked into our MAM system. So when I say add an event token for this point where somebody slipped over, I might say this is going to be a subclip, or some tag that says this is going to end up being a subclip somewhere. And some other back-end system is going to read that XML piece and turn that subclip into something that gets injected into a second screen experience. As I say, this is all developing. The whole second screen market is on fire. And what we're trying to do is create an infrastructure which can allow us to actively drive all of this real-time information into the systems which will deliver it to the consumer. Any other questions? No more questions? So, I say, going to have a demo on the Route 6 booth, G30. And for those that missed it earlier, I'll play our dreadful video again. Hi there.